Hi, Jesse Williams with Case IH. It's Sunday. We're in the field. Going to try to cut some beans today. It's been misting, overcast for the last 2 or 3 days, so we're just getting back in the field on beans today. Still a little damp. They're running about 14.5 moisture. So we're going to do a video while we're waiting on them to dry down a little bit on doing a loss check behind the machine. So very important part of getting the machine set is doing a loss count, and then figuring out if I do have loss on the ground, where is it coming from? There's no need to fight yourself trying to set a machine because you're seeing some beans on the ground and then figure out that those beans came off the header. Or potentially that crop shattered before you ever got to it in the field, and you're trying to set the machine to make it do better. So we're going to take a look at a few ways to do loss count. So I've got this machine set up with some Bushels Plus loss pans on it. They're pretty cool. They're electronic. You charge them up. They got a little 12-volt battery in there. And then they've got this little keyless remote. So I can keep this in the cab, I can press that, I can drop the pan. So it's a kind of easy way to check loss, especially if you're by yourself. You don't have anybody to throw pans under the machine as you're driving past. So I've got some brackets I made to go on the back of the draper head here to mount one off on the right hand side. I've got the other one up underneath the machine on that screen underneath the transmission. I'm holding it in place with some ratchet straps down there. So they're designed to go underneath the back axle of the machine. I have had issues getting the remote control to work when they're under the back axle. So under the feeder house, under the front axle, on the side of the head, they seem to work pretty good. All right, so we're going to take a look in our pans here and see what we got for loss. This is a 3 square foot pan. We got a half a bean there, another half there. One bean there. So we're 2 beans and 3 square foot. That's pretty decent on loss. The neat thing about using pans to do a loss count is I can flip that pan over and I can see underneath what my header loss is. So got a couple pods there, a bean there, a couple small beans there, another pod hanging on the plant there. So these beans got hailed on the first week of June. They got some low pods, they're leaning in spots. They got some branches that have pods on them that are down low. So you can see in this case, my header loss is worse than my machine loss. So we'll play with the head a little bit and try to get that cleaned up. Now my other pan over there, we'll take a look at it. It is a little bit outside of my residue spread, so I probably want to get that residue spreader adjusted a little better. Did put some trash in there, not seeing any beans. Few underneath coming off the head. So when we're looking for loss, we want to go out in the field, typically a few rows in, and look down around the bottom of that plant and look and see if we've got any pre-harvest loss. The other thing that we want to look for is take a look at the plants in the field, see if we're getting any beans that are popping, starting to shatter in the field. Not much you can do about that other than potentially timing your harvest a little bit differently, but it's maybe a good decision-making process. If you've had a rain like we have, you're starting to see some popping. Maybe I'd rather take a little bit of a discount for moisture at the elevator and try to go ahead and get them out before they pop any worse, instead of waiting and having that loss fall on the ground. So, and another thing to look at is this first row where we're cutting through, and look and see, are we breaking some open by throwing the residue with the residue spreaders up against that standing crop? Are we knocking some down with the divider on our head? Sometimes you have a floating or an adjustable divider. If that's riding too high, you maybe want to adjust that down so that it's sliding up underneath that crop and lifting it up instead of bulldozing over it. In this case right here, we're on 30-inch rows. The crop is standing pretty good, and we're running with the rows. So we're not sliding a divider across the rows. We're on RTK guidance, so we're not typically running over anything. So we took a look at the Bushels Plus pans, and that is a great way for checking loss. They are a little bit expensive. I think they run about $1,000 a piece. So if you're not in the mood to spend that for checking loss, another cool solution is using a pan. You know, some people make some screens, but these are just large baking sheets. You can get these at Costco. You can find them online. I've measured it out and calculated it. They're about 25 inches by 17 inches, 425 square inches, or 2.95 square feet. So what I did on this one is I just went through for the 2 crops that I work with, and for 1 through 12 kernels and soybeans, I've listed out what each kernel count per pan is. Corn, I've done the same thing. So 1 kernel per pan would be 0.17 bushels. 10 kernels per pan is going to be 1.7 bushels. So what I will do is I will typically take 3 of these to the field and throw out. They stack together nicely. They're easy to carry in the field when you're running beside the machine. In beans, I drop 1 on either side, and I throw 1 underneath the center of the machine. So I'll show you a video doing that in the bean field here in just a minute. Corn, a lot of times just drop 1 beside the steering tire on either side. Will catch. You can run up and kind of pitch 1 back up underneath the spreaders. A little more difficult to do than sliding 1 underneath the center of the machine in beans. So another thing to keep in mind when we're doing our loss counts is how our residue divider is set. So we want to get that residue divider set so that it's putting that loss near our pans. But we also want to keep in mind if it's throwing more loss in a certain area, we want to take that into account. So sometimes we want to take a 1 foot wide band, the width of the head, kind of go across that and count those kernels. I like to do that in corn because it gives me a good idea of my total loss across the width of the machine. And if I've got 1 row unit on the corn head that maybe has deck plates way out of adjustment, stock rolls out of time, worn, broken, something like that, it's going to point that out as I take that 1 foot wide band across the width of the head. But what we want to do is kind of get an average idea of what our loss is. So this residue spreader, a lot of times we'll throw that loss kind of more down in the center, especially when I've got it opened up for corn. If we've got the dual disc residue dividers, they almost kind of gravity separate that trash. Beans being a little heavier than the trash, corn being a little bit heavier, it's typically going to throw them farther than the trash. So you will sometimes see that loss in your standing row, but keep in mind you probably don't have much for loss in the center with that style spreader. Same thing if you got a John Deere that you're comparing to or looking at, they typically throw the grain a little bit farther than the trash. So just keep that in mind when you're going out and doing loss. So when I'm looking at the corn head loss, I've got some pans that I've got brushes on, put down in front of the rows. And those brushes seal between the rows, and then I can see what I got for butt shell coming off my header. We're taking a look at the brush pans that we use to check the corn head loss. We set them out in the row in front of the combine. The brushes seal up between your rows, so they'll catch the kernels that are falling off the row unit. Drive the combine until the head is just past the pans. We stop it, shut it off, and back it up. So you can see I got a few kernels in here. We're going to try slowing the head down a little bit. This corn is testing about 16 moisture, so it's pretty dry. So we expect a little bit of header loss as we get into drier corn, but we'll tighten the deck plates a little bit and slow the feeder house down to try to correct a little bit of that.